Welcome back to Steen Family Outdoors. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. And if there's other cartridges you want to hear about in the future, please put those down in the comments below. Today, we're going to talk about one of my favorites with the 404 Jeffery. So let's talk about the cartridge and hit some of the dimensions just right off the bat. The 404 Jeffery is a large, dangerous game rifle cartridge. It is shooting not a 40 caliber bullet, but it's shooting a .423 inch bullet. It's the only one out there that's shooting a .423 inch bullet, which makes it kind of cool, but also makes the components difficult to come by. It's coming in close to the overall length of that 3.6 inch mark. So we're getting in a full length Magnum cartridge, and it has a unique rim diameter too at .543 inches. So we talk a lot about Magnum rifles on this channel. The standard Magnum bolt face today is .532 inches, and that's a carryover from the 375 H&H. The 404 Jeffery is running just a little bit bigger at .543 inches. So again, something that makes that cartridge really unique. The standard bullet size that we push out of a 404 Jeffery is 400 grain bullet, and we're able to push that close to 2,300 feet per second. Original loadings were a little more tame, close to 2,150 feet per second. But as time's gone on and powders have gotten better and better, we're seeing the ability to push that bullet up to 2,300 feet per second be still a really mild load with a lot of punch on both your shoulder and on the game. So that's some brief hitters on the 404 Jeffery. And just to help us visualize, let's take a look at some other cartridges next to the 404 Jeffery. So we have the 404 Jeffery right here in the lineup, and next to it, we're gonna look at the 300 Winchester Magnum, and you can already see there's a huge disparity in volume of cartridge, and the bullet size really jumps out. And then also the 6.5 Creedmoor. So we're talking a couple modern favorites, a Magnum rifle, and that 6.5 Creedmoor just dwarfed by the 404 Jeffery. So a very big case with a big old bullet. And let's talk about it as also next to one of its, call it an offspring, with the 28 Nosler. So the 404 Jeffery in recent years has gained a lot of its popularity as a parent case. So a parent case is using an existing cartridge to create a new one. So the 404 Jeffery here was flared out, neck down, and turned into our Nosler line of cartridges. This is the 28 Nosler. It also created the Remington Ultra Mag lines. We also see the Winchester Short Mags, our shortened versions of the 404 Jeffery, and the Remington Short Action Ultra Mags, again, our shortened versions of that 404 Jeffery. The difference in this is when we look at them, they're not pure parent cases. The 404 Jeffery is spawning that bigger rim diameter, so we'll zoom in here and take a look. When you look at that rim diameter on the 404 Jeffery compared to the 28 Nosler, you can see the disparity in size. So it's not a pure parent case. The manufacturers on the Nosler and Remington Ultra Mag, Winchester Short Mag cartridges had to have a different rim diameter. And you might hear them say they're rebated rims. So that means that the rim is just slightly smaller in diameter than the case diameter itself. So that's can be considered one of the drawbacks on that cartridge, and it's rebated because it comes from their offspring cases from the 404 Jeffery, which is not a rebated case. So just a little bit of insight to that, but the 404 Jeffery, very popular as a parent case. Let's take a look at the slugs also that are coming out of these cartridges or the bullets. So I've got a lineup of 5 here, and we're gonna work them through, starting with our 175 grain Nosler partition on a 7mm and our 200 grain partition on a 30 caliber. So I grabbed 2 bullets that are considered pretty darn big ones for North America, and you can see the disparity as we move to our larger cartridges yet, and I just want to help us walk across them. We have a 358 280 grain Swift A-frame, and then a 375 300 grain Swift A-frame, ending up with our 400 grain 423 inch Swift A-frame. So you get to see just how big that bullet is compared to other bullets that are also large for caliber, but that 404 Jeffery and the 423 bullet is packing a punch. So we have a little bit of background now on the cartridge of what it is and how it stacks up to some other ones. Let's chat just a bit about the history on this round. So the 404 Jeffery originated in 1905. Before that point in time, most cartridges for Dangerous Game, or almost all, were rimmed. So they were made for break action rifles like a double rifle or a single shot break action rifle. That was the standard way for Dangerous Game, and Jeffery set out to make a rimless cartridge. So took another one that already existed, that 400 Nitro Express rifle. We turned down the rim, the bullet diameter went up in that design, and we ended up with the 404 Jeffery. So a few other cartridges came after the 404 Jeffery, the 375 H&H being the one we're probably most familiar with. Came out in about 1912, 7 years later. Also the 416 Rigby was another rifle that was surprisingly not nearly as popular as the 404 Jeffery was at the time. The Rigby rifles that we're familiar with today require a really big magnum action to run. You know, those are big cartridges. They're pushing a lot of powder. They push a lot of velocity and energy. And at the time, they were really low pressure too. They're still low pressure, but so you have this low pressure, bigger volume case than the 404 Jeffery. So you needed a bigger rifle. Bigger rifle, more steel, more expensive. So the 404 Jeffery had a lot of popularity in the continent of Africa as a ranger rifle at parks for, you know, managing parks, managing your buffalo and elephant type populations. And it wasn't until Selby, a hunter, went to Africa. He went there originally with his double barrel rifle. There were some issues, and that rifle needed repair. So he used a 416 Rigby that was available. And when Selby, you know, wrote his about his trip in Africa, it was very popular. Talked about the 416 Rigby. That rifle became very romanticized over time and became very popular. Winchester also had their 458 Winchester Magnum that came on the scene, chambered in their Model 70 action. Those two together became your popular Dangerous Game rifles, and you already had your 375 Holland and Holland, also a very popular rifle. And the 404 Jeffery faded into a bit of obscurity. It's seen somewhat of a rise in popularity in recent times as a cartridge folks are interested in, and probably brought on somewhat by a nostalgia factor behind an old cartridge like the 404 Jeffery, and probably we could argue somewhat brought on by all the parent or all the offspring cartridges that have come from the 404 Jeffery. So there's some of the history of the round, developed in 1905. It's kind of faded into obscurity, and if you're looking out there today to buy a rifle, you're not going to find many rifles that are chambered in 404 Jeffery, and not many ammunition manufacturers are making new ammo today. Swift would be one of them that makes factory ammo. You can find some Norma ammo at times. Hornady has made and still kind of makes some components. I've got a lot of Hornady brass for mine and some Winchester or some Swift A-frame bullets that I load for my 404 Jeffery, along with some Hornady bullets. But it's very much a labor of love to put together a 404 Jeffery rifle and be able to use it in the field. So before we look at my rifle and I do some talk throughs on decisions we made in putting this one together, let's compare the 404 Jeffery with some of the contemporary cartridges that are out there today and some of the other Dangerous Game rifles. So let's pull up the data. So we can see here we're comparing the 375 H&H Magnum, the 416 Rigby, 404 Jeffery, and 458 Win Mag. Bullet weights, 300 for the 375. We got 400 for the 416 and 404 Jeffery, and then that 458 Win Mag's pushing a 500 grain bullet. So a big bullet coming out of the 458 Win Mag with high sectional densities. All of these are over 0.3, and if you read a lot into Dangerous Game hunting, 0.3 tends to be the sectional density mark to push for. And we look at sectional density because it correlates to ability to penetrate game, and we want to make sure that we have great penetration to reach the vitals when we're hunting Dangerous Game. Muzzle velocities, the 375 H&H is pushing the most at 2,500, but that 416 Rigby pushes an awful lot of velocity for that big bullet. 404 Jeffries right there at 2300, 458 Win Mag at 2150. The thing that gets talked a lot more though on dangerous game rifles like this is muzzle energy. All of these are over 4,000, but look at the jumps we make here. We get about 600 foot-pounds more of energy to go to the Jeffery, and that same jump, about 600 foot-pounds, to go up to the 416 Rigby. And that 458 Win Mag is kind of in between the two at 5130. There is the 458 lot, which is the full-length Magnum of the 458 Win Mag. 458 Win Mags of 3.34-inch cartridge. So not quite as long and not quite the same powder capacity as some of the others. And then recoil. This is the one that gets a lot of people thinking when we're talking big rifles. The 375 H&H being the tamest at 38 pounds or foot-pounds of energy. 404 Jeffery at 55, 458 Win Mag at 59, and that 416 Rigby at 64. So what's ironic in this is that in dangerous game circles, we often talk about the 404 Jeffery as being kind of a lighter recoil rifle. And it sounds a little bit wild to say that looking at the numbers, but for the performance you get versus the 375 H&H, you get a bigger frontal area bullet by quite a bit. You know, the jump from a 375 H&H to a 404 Jeffery is not that much different than jumping from an 8mm or a 338 to 375. Let's use that one. Not all of us are 8mm fans. It's a bigger jump to go from a 375 to a 404 Jeffery than it is to go from a 338 to a 375. So you get a big jump in frontal area going to the 404 Jeffery. You still get a lot more energy going to the 404 Jeffery. And those are big things when we're talking about dangerous game hunting, is the trade-offs that are there. And then the trade-offs likely aren't as strong when we go into that 416 is the conversation that happens quite a bit. You do get more energy, but you're losing a little bit of frontal area. You gain a little bit of sectional density, but you do get quite a bit more recoil in it too. So the 404 Jeffery tends to be kind of a sweet spot for a lot of hunters when we're really looking at the data and picking out a dangerous game rifle. So we got a chance to talk about the cartridges, the parent cases, the bullets, some data behind it. Let's take a quick look and I'll talk through my 404 Jeffery that we have here and some of the decisions in it. So this 404 Jeffery started out as a Model 70 Black Shadow rifle. So that was one of these Black Shadow rifles that comes with a synthetic basic stock. It was a carbon steel Model 70 rifle, but it's a control round feed rifle, and it was chambered in 300 Remington Ultra Magnum. And since 300 Remington Ultra Mag is one of the its parent case is the 404 Jeffery, it's very easy to get that to feed. That 404 Jeffery to feed in this magazine setup, which lowers the cost of a conversion, one big pro. It makes it very reliable to feed, the biggest pro. And we still get to keep a really strong action with the Model 70. So if you're looking at a 404 Jeffery, the Model 70 is a really popular way to make that conversion happen. So that's our base action. We also switched out the bottom metal. It came with a two-piece bottom metal. We changed that out to a super grade single-piece steel bottom metal. And we changed our stock out to the Winchester Safari Express stock, a walnut stock. So both that bottom metal and the stock I was able to get through online, some kind of parts through Winchester, if you will. And for the bottom metal, I mean, we're talking about a couple $100 and a couple $100 for the stock. So these aren't, the stock definitely is not the fanciest walnut stock in the world, but I wanted to have a working 404 Jeffery that I wasn't afraid of, you know, fancy walnut getting scratched up if I was on a hunt, or worried about metal or intricate engraving getting scratched. I wanted a working rifle more than anything. From there, we added our barrel. This is a K&P barrel, chambered in 404 Jeffery. We need to have iron sights. We have New England custom game sights for both the front sight and rear sight on this rifle. And then we have worn QD rings mounted up with a loopholed VX5 HD 1:5. And this is a little bit of a different one too. We got capped elevation end capped windage on this. It has the fire dot. It's a fire dot 4 reticle. That number 4 reticle gives us a really good open field of view for a dangerous game rifle, and the fire dot focuses us in well. So this is really a scope that has dangerous game in mind. I like a true 1 power on a lot of hunting rifles. I think the true 1 powers are really great scopes, but especially if you might have a target that charges, a target that might move on the run, and I want to keep my field of vision, it's hard to beat the 1 power scopes. So those are the decisions we made. I really like our Model 70 Action. Very little work to be done on it. 3 position safety. I love that. Really a control round feed is classic in a dangerous game rifle. Only modification needed is we needed to open our extractor up just a little bit to accommodate that bigger rim diameter on the 404 Jeffery. But this is a rifle that I'm really excited about. It came with a New Haven Winchester. I like that original Winchester trigger. This one is set at about 3.5 to 4 pounds. Just over 3.5 pounds is the last time I checked it. And I like that weight on a dangerous game rifle. I want to have to be conscious about pulling the trigger, but I still like that crisp trigger pull. I'll go a little bit lighter when we're talking about plains game or deer hunting or elk hunting, but on my dangerous game rifle, I like to have just a little bit heavier pull. So those are the choices made on this rifle. Really excited to have one in 404 Jeffery myself. There's not a lot of content that gets talked about in the 404 Jeffery anymore. If you're interested in a dangerous game rifle, keep looking at the 404 Jeffery as an option. I think it has a really unique blend of big frontal area, good modest velocity for big game hunting, but still doesn't give you quite the recoil punishment that you get as you look at your 416s, or especially as you move into the 458s with a bit more stopping power than the 375 H&H. So hope you enjoyed this video. If there are other cartridges you want to learn more about, or if you have questions about our 404 Jeffery build, please put them down below. And until next time, get out there and enjoy the outdoors.